I'm going to do this without the microphone, and this thing really makes me nervous because I've been known to, I'm known for like saying things that I probably shouldn't say. So to have it recorded is like, I texted my wife earlier. I was like, they're going to mic me, they're going to record this. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. Thank you for everyone that brought me out here. It's really special and kind of a weird thing to come back and to see like teachers and people that were like big influences like in my early life, and then now like I look at them as friends, and it's just. And then last night, like I think around 11:30 at night, like I couldn't sleep, so I walked through the studios to see what was going on, and it was just weird, like thinking 13 years ago, like conversations I had with some of my peers. And where they are now, and it's kind of a weird situation, but it's a good situation. This is well, I'll talk about this later. This is my family. Like we decided like this year, like I always wondered like if we made a flag, a family flag, like what it would look like. So it kind of made sense to me to, and we were going on a trip to New England, and I wanted to like kind of conquer places. So like within this flag, like I used my palm, my wife's thumb, my oldest son's like index finger, Rocco's middle finger, Trey's ring finger, and Andre's pinky. And we started planning this thing kind of as like a family vacation just across like the New England coastline this summer. My work is black and white photography for the most part. They're silver gelatins, they're traditional. I use my family. And just to give a little bit of background, I do work with 7 galleries, 3 in Germany, 1 in Seattle, 2 in New York, 1 in San Francisco. The blue are just people that I send work to. These are the exhibitions that like, I've kind of had that like my family and I travel to. Or like I'll travel to, and I've been fortunate, and like everywhere along the road, from being in education to like out of education, like things kind of just fit for us. And I'm not saying that things weren't ever tough, but I've just always had like a strong foundation from family to teachers to like outside influences, and just a couple of examples. This is an art fair in Chicago and the way that I hung it. This is in Seattle, Berlin. I build these installations, and basically the only thing I show is the photograph. This is in San Francisco. And these are some of the images. So I think a lot of my work starts from like the tip of Pennadatolo in Italy. It's right where my grandparents immigrated from. This is the village that all the Rodas are from. It's a really poor village. We visited it a couple of times. My grandfather had 7 brothers. They all like moved over to the United States at the same time, all but one moved over. One stayed and married a cousin. I used to listen to my grandfather all the time talk about like being a little kid and his journey across, and packing up all their belongings and traveling from Italy to the United States and just being in this foreign place. And it's kind of a place where like I wasn't there, but I heard the story, and it was a place for me to be able to recreate this story. He talked about being angry with his father, and like why did he have to leave Italy, this place that he loved, that he always wanted to go back to, and just being dissatisfied with like the United States. So it's very easy for me to kind of like put myself and like my son, my family, like within this scene, and like have the same kind of tension. They all, for some reason, I guess because of the railroads, they all settled in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is where I grew up, in this the tip of this cornfield. My parents wanted to be my dad particularly wanted to be self-dependent, so we had like solar panels, back 30 years ago, and to have hot water we would, use it off the sun. He also hooked up the fireplace, which we cooked from often, which is kind of goes back to this idea of Italy, and my grandparents cooked on their stove. But to have hot water, we would have to, during the wintertime, we would have to have a fire first that would heat the pipes, and then we would be able to take a warm shower. We also, he really didn't want to eat steroid-free meat, and he wanted to know what the animals were eating that we were eating. So we raised all of our own food. We had a big garden. We would stand there as a family and pick lima beans forever. We would raise 60 chickens, and on Sundays we would slaughter them along this tree on your left. And this piece on the right was just, again, just a memory that I just had ingrained in my head that I wanted to get out, so I made it. I didn't have real chickens, so I just made them out of clay. And my son was just kind of standing in for this time that I remember. It was my job to collect all the heads. I was too young to pluck all the feathers, so we would line up as a family. My brothers and sisters and mom would all pluck the feathers. It would be my job to collect the heads before the dog would run off with them. And I remember getting twigs and poking these heads and making puppets out of them, and just kind of really fascinated with everything. We would also name, play, ride a cow every year, and then we would slaughter it in my sister's bathroom. And I would be there, right there with my dad, holding the heart and the liver and sawing the head off with a saw. And it was crazy. This was Elvis, that we were eating. When we weren't like the Dahmer family, I don't know. We were, we did this on Sundays. We would have church at our house. My parents, my family, my extended family was all Catholic. My parents broke away from the Catholic Church, and they decided to hold church at our house. My dad was he was the one in control, telling us what to believe. And after a while, we would, it's how many things can you tell us? Because the religion and the information kept changing, so it just became kind of ridiculous. So this piece that you're looking at on the left is more about some of the religious things that we learned than what you're actually seeing. When we weren't doing that, we were traveling all over the world. I think we went to maybe 28 states, 19 countries. We traveled 2 or 3 vacations a year, and we would pack our bags with canned potatoes and ramen noodles, and we would just see 30 things, 7 countries in 2 weeks. And we would only see the highlights, which is, as an adult, we've moved around a lot, but it's I don't really like vacations. I won't go somewhere unless it's a month or longer, so we can really eat the food, get to know the people. But one of my favorite places as a kid was Las Vegas. I thought if we just came here first, maybe we could have had cable TV. Maybe we could have ate food at my friend's house. And MGM, in Florida, was always something and I guess I'm being facetious in this, but this fake background, there's something there that started that stuck with me as an adult and someone that was in school. Studying ceramics here at Penn State. I know these are terrible pieces, but, terrible images of pieces. They're wonderful pieces. I started here. I did 4 years of art education. I did everything but my student teaching in this one psychology class that I just couldn't pass. Probably because I didn't study. But at some point, and Chris, I hope you don't get in trouble for this, Chris came and said, would you rather teach at a college level, or would you rather teach K through 12? And you know, it was something where like I took a clay class and I just connected to the material, I connected to the teachers. And there's certain things, you know, like Chris would say things like, you know, I'm young, he would say things like the most powerful work has the largest contrast, or like the strongest line is juxtaposed to a curve. And these things that like I would think about, like what the hell does that mean? You know, but like it stuck with me forever. And you know, Liz demanded the best from me, always. And it was something like, at one point Chris told me to stop throwing because I just wasn't interested. I was interested in hand building, and you know, I would like to sit and listen to him talk, but you know, like I felt like I was always, you know, interested to know what Liz said, and she always demanded the best from me. And I wanted to, like, I was 100% in, you know. She would always say, yeah, that's great, but what about the bottom? And I'm like, oh, I forgot about the bottom. And in this way, I told her yesterday I'm a control freak, and I think she started this control issue that I have. Because I have to control the bottom. I have to control the hook that I put my work on. And the people I work with are like, you're crazy. No one's going to see the hook. You know, at some point Liz wanted me to, we had to reproduce an historical painting, and I picked Sutan, and like this was the work I made, and no one understood like, I think like what this piece was. It was kind of gross. And then later I noticed like Rembrandt and Francis Bacon did the same work. You know, I was making clumsy work that was one word that would describe it always was whimsical, and I hated that word. And I hate that word, like I hate that word in ceramics or in any way, because I was putting always my guts into this work, my life into this work, and I hated when people would laugh at it. At one point, Liz and Chris both, I think, decided that like they couldn't help me anymore. And they said, like, you know, you really need to study with, you know, these two people. You should do these two workshops with these two people. And, you know, again, I say I was all in. I was all in. I had a wife. I had a kid. I packed up. I studied with Arthur Gonzalez for 2 weeks at Haystack. And Arthur, at the time, he was a huge influence for me. There's two things I learned about Arthur. One, there was no rules. He broke every rule I was taught in school. He put, especially when it came to clay, he like made work faster than I've ever seen anyone make work. He would like put things in the clay, he would like fire it, it would all blow up, he'd glue it back together. And at one point I said, don't you slip and score? And he like looked at me and he said, what is that? And I'm like, and I think again, he was being facetious, you know? But then the other thing he taught me was like, I didn't want to study with him. He was like this jokester guy, you know, that like was not as serious as I was. And I have to say, we're now pretty good friends. But like, I was like, I can't stand this guy. He's too like, he thinks he's too funny, you know? I'm serious. And then like, I did another workshop, a 1-week workshop with Doug Jeck in Santa Fe. And at the time that I met Doug, his wife just drained his bank account, took his kids and left. And you know, I met him and he was probably at the lowest part of his life. And we were in this weird situation in Santa Fe where like, you know, all these like elderly people were taking this workshop with Doug and I, and like at 4:30 everyone packed up their bags and went home for the night. And there it was like Doug and I staying at the same hotel, like next to each other, and we just kind of got to know each other. We just sat there and talked for an entire week. Doug didn't make any work, like Arthur, like, you know, just like, I think he filled like 5 kilns in 2 weeks. And I just really connected with him. I thought like he was someone that I could talk to, and we just really understood each other. I came right back and I just started blasting out this work that was pretty bad, but you know, you can see like their influences. I was still pooling. People stopped laughing. I knew I had 1 semester to apply to graduate school because I stopped art ed, so I think in one semester, my goal was always to make 30, 40, 50 works. And I think everything I applied to was basically made in one semester. And I got into the University of Washington, they said, because of my BFA postcard picture, which, you know, at some point when I was making this work, I mean, most sculptors photograph their work against like a neutral background so that, you know, the work looks great. And I just realized that like if I could build a context around my sculpture, I can make it look better. And maybe I could say something different. So that was where this postcard came in. You know, I got a free ride to Alfred, teaching. You know, the tuition was paid. That was the first school that I heard back from. I was excited, but I really wanted to go to Seattle. Doug called me. He said, you know, you're fifth. You're on the wait list. You know, I don't know what to tell you. Someone backed out, which has been the story of my life. I'm always on the wait list. Someone backed out, and Doug called back and said, we can offer you $1,000. And I think like at certain points, you know, as students, you know, your parents are going to like weigh in and say like free ride, health benefits, you know, like teaching, $1,000, you know, like my wife and I both agreed like, let's go to Seattle. And, you know, and it was one of those moments that like everyone that was like, my parents thought I was crazy. My in-laws thought I was crazy, but it was one of those decisions that I made that we never looked back, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I went back out there, I reunited with Doug. Performance was like a huge part of out there at the University of Washington. Akio, you know, is this cute little Japanese man that would just like either say things because he's really smart or say things because or like you just don't understand what he's trying to get at, and it would make you think in really weird, provocative ways. And then I met Jamie Walker, who is like, you know, another huge influence. This guy had a family, he was stable. Maybe Doug wasn't the most stable, but Jamie was stable, he had a family, and if you asked him for a recommendation or paperwork, this guy pushed it through, and like you could always depend on him. And somewhere between these three guys, like, you know, I really took something from each one of them. First thing I did was get in a bucket of clay. Second thing, you know, out there, even though it's a dry campus, every Tuesday night they would get a keg and have an opening. And, you know, they would have these parties. This was like, we had to pick out of a hat. This is a Christmas party. We had to pick out of a hat who we were going to be, and I ended up being the Mary. And then eventually the baby Jesus one to be held. It was one of those places that, like, you know, I had to say, okay, Tuesday night, I'm going to stay in my studio. I'm not going to that thing that's out there. But there was something about these photographs. This was the day after, on your left. My son's checking my pulse. And then this is the baby Jesus again. We talked him into like becoming the hawk for a birthday party. We set up like you know, styrofoam all over the house, and like he just came out of the bathroom and started like wrecking styrofoam like everywhere. And it was great until like the kids realized he wasn't the real hawk and they attacked him. But there was something about these photographs that like started doing something for me. And then, you know, I'm an avid sports fan. And there's something, Allen Iverson, I love Philadelphia sports, but there's something about this photo that Sports Illustrated published on their cover, and anyone that knows Allen Iverson knows that like he's missing about 400 tattoos. Sports Illustrated thought that they would like airbrush them out because it was they didn't want kids to be influenced by that at the time. And I like that idea that the person looking at this, if you don't know this, you just accept it for what it is. And then also like the Microsoft ad, I mean, it's just something that's like kind of scary to me because it's about cloning and everyone being the same, but then at the same time, you know, it's for someone in technology, it's about the future. So I like kind of this back and forth of, you know, maybe not taking a stance. Dwayne Hansen, I looked at his work. I thought I saw his work once, but then the people moved. It was at Penn State. You know, his work in a context, in the gallery versus a context, became like pretty powerful to me. Brothers Quay, I didn't understand their films, but I understood like the silent one image because I felt that way before. So I went back to like my own personal history. I have 4 boys. They're kind of molds of my wife and I, of my grandparents, of her parents, and I like to think about these kind of like historical pieces as almost brothers, cousins, family members. They're all from the same material. And I started like, going back to these stories of what it was like to eat at our house. Our big Italian family, no one wanted to eat our chicken because it had pin feathers on it. I started like really looking at like the self-portrait and like cutting up family members and like making other people that somewhat look like myself. I always look at painting. I've always been attracted to kind of Flemish and German painting, the way that they use light, what they're doing, symbolism. And like, I don't understand all the symbols that are on this piece on the left, but could I make my own symbols in my own language that only I understand? The way that you use composition and light. And to be able to work in clay in this way was liberating for me because a finished piece didn't mean that it had to be fired and glazed. It was like I could make these long legs and then like I could throw it back in the bucket and make a giraffe. And it was just like this different way of working. And at the time I had no idea what I was doing. My son came in, he's like, stand up, it's like, and my wife is photographing the work, and it's just like, we're kind of trying to figure this out. At first, I didn't develop my work. I would like send it to like this guy, like a CVS, and have him develop it. And it was really bizarre because I get them back, they'd be like shiny. I knew there was some awkward moments. He was probably talking to the police or something. He's like, there's some weird photographs that this guy keeps bringing in. But I didn't want to deal with the technical aspects of the camera and developing. I just wanted to try to get my ideas out and try to understand what was going on. Again, like I kind of went back to this religious theme a little bit. And all of these were the same exact wall. So going back to MGM, I like that people would say like, where is this place? And they would be upset about Ethan being upset. But what they didn't know was he was crying because he wanted a lollipop or he wanted a snack before we took the picture, and we said, wait. And like his emotions are like, saying something different. Much different in color than what it is in black and white. I mean, I rely a lot on black and white. But they're all the same wall. And when people would say, where is that place? Well, it's the same as that place. And for me, that was kind of a joke. Same as this place. And, I could deal compositionally. Like I would set up my camera and I'd put a piece in and then I'd go back to my camera and everything was compositional to the camera. Like everyone, people want to classify you. I think at some point, like everyone says, are you aware of Sally Mann? Are you aware of Joel Peter Wiccan? Every time I go to Germany, they say, like, are you aware of the Israeli couple who's no longer a couple, they're divorced? Are you aware of the Trachtenberg family? And I say, yeah, I'm aware of these people. They all deal with their families, but I don't really care what they do. I don't look at them. I like Jeff Koons, which, I think he is an important person in contemporary art. I think his ceramic work is an important part of contemporary art. I love, I talked to Joyce earlier. I took, I don't know if you remember me, but I took an art history class, an African American art history class. I think I might have got a D. I have to look at my transcripts. Maybe a C. But this class like influenced me so much in my life, and I always say that if there's a photographer I look at, it's from these people, the 1920s and 1950s, Gordon Parks. I mean, they're raw. They're self-taught. Like what I'm doing is not as raw as what they were doing, and I like. I like the way that they use light. I like the way that they use social issues. I like that they're self-taught, some of them. And I like looking at artists that kind of push the boundaries of what things are. I love, history is really important to me. Art history is really important to me. And I think like one of the smartest people making work is Sam Taylor Wood. Her work is just, I remember like drinking, I was at an opening at the MoMA and like I was drinking some wine and I went around the corner and I was just like kind of, what is that? And I'm just watching this rabbit decay like on a flat screen TV in such like an historical way, and it was just really smart. Walter McConnell, the way he uses materials. This guy kills me. The leaf guy. What's his name? Andy Goldsworthy. But I like how his work stands for a moment, and it's captured. My favorite artist is Grunwald. I go back to this piece, which I saw in Germany in a show. It's like just a little tiny piece with so much texture, but I always think about this piece. I look at Leonardo da Vinci and like the contraptions that he would make. They didn't make sense, but they're like kind of these weird sketches, these kind of weird things. And I'm making like these photographs that are somewhat accidents, but I like that maybe you can't tell that that was made in 2010, And I think that's really important, and that you can't tell that this is Doug Jeck, it's just kind of, and that this is me and my son. I mean, I like that you can't do that, and like it kind of goes back and forth with what's going on. I get these ideas. I was walking in the street in New York and I saw this thing and we just instantly I was walking with my family, we just instantly jumped down on the ground and started doing a performance with it. And of course, I went to my studio and I started making this saw where my son was running over me, and it was just kind of a fun moment. We did this show in New York, Games of Antiquity, and I've always been kind of curious about the artifact within the work. So to be able to exhibit something that's also in the photograph and how it's exhibited. So I've been really attracted to art, to things I haven't seen before in ways that I haven't seen before. And when people float things by me, I learn from this. I like non-traditional materials, and I think that if a student would hand this in, they would get an A++. I think it's really smart and funny, and something you can't buy from Dick Blick. So absurdity and how does that enter your studio? Fun. I think I was just I heard an artist talk. He kept talking about Foucault and how much of an inspiration he is to his work, but he didn't say anything about play. And I said, he wrote a lot of stuff about play. I said, where do you play in your studio? And basically this artist was there's no place for play. I'm well, obviously I think Foucault might not be an influence for you. But I didn't want to say that. My students knew I was pretty dissatisfied with his answer. But I think play, when does play, enter the studio? And for me, when do you recognize a mistake? I know when I do things and mistakes happen, and you recognize when that mistake happens, that's when I think you start to grow as an artist. That's when I start to grow as an artist, especially when you recognize it and you recognize what you like about that. I love Norman Rockwell, which is a bad word in art. But I think he does things, I like how universal he is. My grandmother likes him. She thinks he's smelling these flowers. I think he's looking down that girl's shirt. This is a nice Thanksgiving Day kind of meal. But this kid over here, he reminds me of my cousin, Dan, who always likes to smoke a joint before we eat turkey. He's got those little slit eyes, and he's just a little creepy. I like that if you line a ruler up, these guys aren't looking at her praying. They're looking at something off the page, and I want to know what that is. And as an artist, I want to make work that wants someone to question what's over there. And anyone that sees the show, which I don't want to talk about, I rely within that camera frame and within like my work, I rely on claustrophobia. I rely on, you know, texture, pattern, not color, tension, maybe color. But, you know, so that the viewer looks at the work and maybe can't concentrate on like one area, or like their eyes are constantly moving. I've had exhibitions where like you hang them kind of salon style, and commercially they're disastrous because people walk in, like especially at our fair, they'll walk in, they'll be like, and like they'll look around, they'll have this moment, but they don't want to buy one piece because they can't focus on a piece. Probably, you know, I mean, maybe they don't want to buy it because they don't like it, but but I rely as an artist on kind of overwhelming the viewer and controlling like maybe the way that they see things. And you know, and then, you know, this piece is like, I always laugh, like, you know, people assume that he sees the real Santa. I always think like this guy Santa is probably like, you know, with his mom. And I've gotten lots of physicals before, but I've never jumped up on a chair to look where the doctor got his degree. So within this work, again, like how do I like, you know, do these things? You know, my grandparents would always fight. My wife and I would fight, you know, or like we would argue over simple things. You know, how do I bring this in the studio? You know, we went to a bar, it's called the Fiddler Inn in Seattle, and at the bar they said, you guys can stay inside, but your son has to stand outside the fence because we don't have kids here or something. I don't know why, but I was so mad again. Like I went to my studio and I made this kind of fence-like thing where he had to stand on the backside, also kind of referencing like the Gordon Parks where he's like looking up above the pothole. And, you know, and then, you know, we have these moments where, you know, within the photograph, within the documentation where like, you know, this could be a serious image or whatever. It could be about domestic abuse or arguing, but we think about this as like, you know, the first 2 times my wife tried to throw wine on me, it went over my shoulder and we all like sat there and laughed and like, and then we drank the rest of the wine and had dinner, and I mean, it was a great time. So it's weird because what the public would see versus what would actually happen at these places like was 2 different things. You know, being able to, you know, have him yell in my ear, but yet go back and be able to yell in my dad's ear was something like where we could kind of automatically shift, you know, what's going on. And where I found I wasn't, you know, trying to use clay at all, but if I didn't have a life preserver, I could make it out of clay. Or if I didn't have a cone, I could make it, because to find that cone like would be, I don't know, too much money, too much effort, too much possibility. And possibility is probably the wrong word. When I was in graduate school, I never let anyone into my studio. They only saw the finished work. My faculty, Akio, would come around and, you know, I would have coffee ready for him. And we'd sit there and just drink coffee, and like he'd say, so what do you got going on? I'd be like, yeah, a lot. Doug at one point, you know, talked me into saying, you know, like, we've never been to the other side. Can I be in a photograph? So like he became like in one of these works, and I was like, I don't want your advice. I mean, something that happened to me at Penn State, which was like, you know, I don't know whose decision it was, but they put me in the middle of the room. And, you know, I would work on something and someone would come by and be like, that's great, but why didn't you do it this way? And like, that would mess up my idea. It was terrible. And then it was like wrong. So like, I went to graduate school, I stapled my door shut. No one could come in until I got my idea like totally finished. And I would make a piece a day. I wouldn't leave my studio until that idea was caught on film. And it was just kind of this moment where I didn't have people confusing me. So I told Doug he could be in it, but he was going to be a dead person and he couldn't talk. After graduate school, we went to Montana. You know, again, I had an exhibition at Greg Kucera, and like we were just looking for something to do. I didn't know what to do. You know, I probably should have stayed in Seattle because I think I should have just stayed there. But I went to Montana, which was a great place. I think I made 50 or 60 works. Outside of school, I tried to keep that schedule going. I knew when people had their crits, and I tried to like have work ready for no one to look at. But you know, again, kind of working at this like absurd way. We didn't have a camel, so we make it out of clay. There's something there that happened where, like, you know, we started like balancing like family life when we moved from Penn State to Seattle to Montana. You know, the Bray was awesome. The people at the Bray were awesome. What I didn't like was the community. I didn't like the school system. I didn't like the people at the school system. I mean, they were so conservative. And the year that we were there, I was there with Chris. We were studio mates, but you know, it was the year that George Bush got reelected, and it was just a dismal time. Like, people were voting for George Bush because their brother's cousin hunts, and they didn't want like guns to be taken away. And you know, I was teaching at the Catholic college, and like they were allowed to learn one photo class. And I remember when I showed like anything, they would go to the priest and tattle on me. And I was just like, this place, like, you're so conservative, you know. But if you're going to learn about photography and you only have one class, you're going to see Robert Mapplethorpe's photos, you know. So, you know, I went back to like these memories, just kind of working. You know, my wife, it was May, I think there's still snow on the ground, or April, there's still snow on the ground. My wife got a letter saying she got into Columbia. I got a letter. I was applying to things left and right. I got a letter saying I got an artist residency in Greenwich Village. It's called the Mary Walsh Sharp Foundation. And my wife, I had a show in May. My wife is like, see you later, I'll see you in May. And she left in April. And it was one of these things, like, it was a tough place for us. So we packed up all of our things, 2 cats, kid, all of our belongings in a U-Haul. My mom decided to come out and like go across the country with me. I was like, oh my. I made every opportunity. I was going through Chicago, so I called a couple galleries, you know, stopped with my mom, the U-Haul, the 2 cats, opened up the doors, took my portfolio of work, opened it up, you know, like, she's standing there with the blinkers on, the police are trying to move us. And that's kind of been like how I work. You know, the museum, Rod Slemons at the Museum of Contemporary Photography said, no way, ever in hell. He had like, you know, a list of 25 questions, you know, about my work, which eventually became my artist statement. And like 4 or 5 years later, you know, he said, you know, I sent him a postcard. He said, we were just talking about you, and he offered me a solo show. And it was like one of those moments where, like, you know, it's like persistence, I think, sometimes is important. So we moved to New York City. It was a moment where, you know, it just made sense for me to study Ellis Island, go to Ellis Island and like study about my history. I decided I needed to look smart, you know, because everyone at the openings, you know, wore black and had glasses and that little thing. So this is my really smart look. And I went to openings, and at the time, like, immigration, like with the Mexican border, was like really in the news, and I was just kind of curious about these people that, you know, take all their belongings again, and maybe, you know, they immigrate, or maybe they sneak over, and like the jobs that they get, and like how hard they work. I mean, my grandparents, like, would work so hard, you know, 2, 3, 4 jobs, whatever, to make it happen. I started in graduate school. Instead of an art history class, I applied for a Fulbright grant as an independent study, and got rejected. I got rejected, I think last night I said 6 times. The final time, I finally got it. Well, the 5th time I got rejected, I said, whatever, like, somehow I got a show in Germany, and we said, let's go to Italy anyway. So I went to Italy for a month. I took a bunch of photographs. I came back, I wrote my proposal, and I said, this is what I can do in a month. I need 9 more. So I got the Fulbright. And again, it's like one of those moments where, like, you make it happen. And I think there's some luck involved, because you don't know who you're up against. But each time I got a little closer, and each time, like, who knows? I mean, that last time, I always kind of joke, I feel like it was 1 year too late for me personally to get the Fulbright. But I started making work, a lot of work, again, always making a lot of work, always editing work. But again, like, I started hanging these strips and just wondering about assimilation. That was what I wrote my Fulbright on, was immigration and assimilation, and how people go to a country and they try to conform to fit in. And this is like what happens a lot of times. You lose your language, you lose part of your culture. I mean, my parents don't speak Italian because my grandparents wanted them to become American. So I started like trying to build these things to go back into time again, like to go back to Italy. When I was there, I went on the same boat, did the same trip that my grandfather did in some ways. Met all these other Rodas. Met all these other Rodas that I didn't know about. The one that stayed back eventually settled in Toronto. And so we have this huge extended family in Montreal and Toronto that still have these properties in this old village. So we went up there, and my sisters are like, "You're doing what? You don't even know these people." I'm like, "They're family." But, again, like, they're as curious about us as we were about them. And I started seeing things like in Italy that made sense. My father, like, we had a swimming pool. And like he didn't want to fix it, so he filled it in with trash and covered it up. And when it put a flower garden on top of it. And like when we were in Italy, I saw like they were building a wall and they were putting all these wine bottles and tires and trash in there and then covering it up. And then like, they put a dog in this cage, and I'm like, that's something my grandfather would do. And I started thinking like, we're not that weird. We weren't that weird. Maybe we lost our language, but the way that we kind of do things is like, it's the Calabrian way. Like, we build things. Like, maybe we lost our language, but we didn't lose this way of building things. Because my grandfather, my father, they're not artists, but we all build things in like these kind of quirky, weird ways, and we use what's around. Like, they don't have a Home Depot or a Lowe's in Calabria, but if they want to make a pedestal, they'll get a tire and pour some kind of concrete in it and make it look Roman. We spent 3 months in Rome, and for the first 3 months, it was, for the first month, I couldn't make work because it's like, where does it stand within like this Roman sculpture that someone polished their whole entire life? And I guess in some ways, my answer to that was the impermanence of the materials that I work in, like the clay, the photo, the mirror, the tape. That was my answer, was like, it's the opposite of like what those guys used to do. And like, yeah, this thing will last maybe 50 years, but that's the only way I could start building work, because it was just like, what's the point? We would go on tours and we would detour tours and quickly jump on otters, take photographs. We would, this was the same beach that my grandfather ran on, and at some point, this was in his room. He was dying. He took off the ventilator. He said, like, how'd you get that picture of me when I was running? He was back in this place. We started kind of creating this work, this world that's just kind of weird. It's like fairy tale. It's a story. Like when we were in Montana, it was completely dark, and we decided in Rome, like, we wanted to, we were looking for a place that had a skylight. So we found this place online that had a skylight. What we didn't know was that the whole entire roof was a skylight. So it was like glass, and we were on the first floor, so everyone above us at any point could like look down and see what we were doing. So it was really a weird thing. So like, the centaur was for them, and they would throw spaghetti on our roof, and it was really weird. And like another thing that happened in Rome was, they'd have these terrible lightning hailstorms. I remember laying in bed, like looking up at the sky and like seeing these horrible lightning storms like above us, and we like 3 or 4 times we got under the table because we thought the glass was going to crack, We also, you know, I've always been interested in like spinners, grills, kind of like hip hop, all that, you know, that's what I listen to. So we made this chariot. I was tired of like seeing all these fake Roman people with their plastic swords. So we like made this chariot that was motorized. I think I spent like 100 hours on it. Like it was motorized, the wheels went one way, the spinners went the other. We took this thing through the streets of Rome and we challenged all the Romans. You know, there was a moment, there's always rules that you talk about or that you think, maybe there's rules. I mean, there's rules that I have for myself. And like one was always like no words. I don't want to be distracted by words within the work. Another one was always like no smiling. Because a lot of times, I mean, how many people you're dealing with family portraits, family photographs. And I mean, I didn't want to be like something in a photo album. I didn't want to be like, there's a difference. And I thought sometimes like smiling covered up, like especially in a photo album, like I wasn't always happy in those moments that like, you know, people would say smile. And I just wanted it to just be like kind of what it was. But then there was like a sense for this, in this piece that was kind of humorous. Ethan's getting bigger, like he's got his own sense of humor, and there was just like a sense of play. Again, like, you know, going and challenging the Romans, you know, around the city. It's playful. People always talk about the kids and what it's like to have them grow up in this way, and I think it's been remarkable, I think. You know, it's not like Sally Mann where she couldn't put down the camera ever, and she's taking these moments. The only time I get the camera out is like in my studio. But there's so many moments where like, you know, Ethan, you know, from age 3 to whenever, could go into someone's studio and say, hey, why are you making this life-size Bert and Ernie? Or like, you know, Richard Knockin, like, what is that about? Or, you know, like this guy Ryan, you know, it's like, there's smart decisions that they're making that everyone was always kind of like very generous in their time to explain what's going on. I talk a lot about you know, getting payment within the commercial world and the gallery, and like my kids, my family, Ethan's been there the whole time. He knows that like someone owes you money, and like that maybe we can't splurge on something, or we need to hold back because so-and-so, I can't say because I'm mic'd up, so-and-so hasn't paid for a year, and we're all feeling those struggles. So, you know, and when we're making this work about so-and-so and offering so-and-so like the bread and my baby, you know, it's like the only thing that I could deal with. You know, and you know, it's like I made this piece, like I'm trying to threaten her here with a knife. I'm trying to give her my children. I'm trying to like, you know, she's the queen. And just, it was consuming, and like, you know, when I get in these conversations, Ethan would be like, what is this about? Like, it's like, we all know what it's about, you know? Except so-and-so. No, she knows too, I think. You know, we've been able to travel. You know, we're always like, you know, I had a show in Berlin, like we all go. In Montana, like, again, like Ethan, and I'll talk about Ethan because he's mostly involved. He's had a great network of friends where like, you know, one choice that like my wife and I made from the start was like, if we leave this place, doesn't mean that you lose your friends. So when we go back to Seattle, like he always stays with his best friend Maya out there. And like with Facebook and things like that, it's so easy. I mean, he's got friends everywhere in Long Island, in Montana, and Rome. And it's been a really cool thing. One of the best moments is when we don't photograph because they pull things out of the box and they all like, you know, just kind of perform. And there's like, this is a studio in Majorca. It was a live workspace. And, you know, so I'm building work in this space, but the beds are like, and the beds and kitchen are on the other side. And like the whole time they're just pulling like props out and like just, you know, building crazy things. Painting, I mean, being in art, starting in art education has been interesting for me. I often thought several times about like going for my doctorate in art education because I'm so dissatisfied with like what kids learn in school. it's a really weird thing. Like Ethan and Rocco, I mean, they have like dinners with like Greg Kucera, like, you know, gallerists, curators. They see all this crazy art. And then in school, if like their art teacher asks them for a shoebox one more time, or like, you know, some kind of finger tactile exercise that they do, or a self-portrait that doesn't, you know, doesn't look like him. He's gotten so many D's in art. And it's just like, I think last year at some point he said, you should look us up on the internet to the teacher. And I'm like, Ethan, you can't say that, you know? I'm like, it's an art class, just do it. But I'm really curious. I mean, Akio has a son that I became really good friends with, and Tanya Gasson-Grunert has a son. You know, like this is another kid that's been around like great artists, you know, great art community. I'm always curious about how they work, how they like find themselves in school and what they're doing. And like, it seems like a lot of people, a lot of kids struggle in that situation. You know, opportunities. Tanya, I know that she went away in the month of August, so I presented the question to her, like, hey, how about if we live in your apartment for a month, which is here, and we have a show in September. And she said, okay. So we lived here for 1 month. We had a show here. First thing I did was call Doug and like some of my other friends and said, hey, we're having this show. You want to like, I told them the theme of it. I told them what they wanted to do, and they all showed up. And it was like this moment, it was the first moment where as an artist, like I didn't have my studio door stapled shut. And we weren't copying each other. We weren't like looking to like steal ideas, but like as a group, like I could turn around, I could see what Doug was working on. I could see like what like my other like peers were working on, and it was a really educational time. I taught at Purchase, I taught at NYU, so like I had this great group of kids that like I paired up, so each artist had like someone to help them like kind of intern. And we just, I think there was like 14 of us there at some points. They all slept, they would work all night long. My kids would get up at, my 3 kids would get up at 5 and crawl over them. And it was just like, it was this cool moment, and we would like perform, and this is a moment where like it could have been really staged, but as adults, we were staged. The kids were running around saying charge, saying like hit you, and like again, like in color from black and white, it became like something that was like just this moment where it was like crazy. It says two different things. Chris Miller built this, he was another grad, he built this great kind of sculpture, and we needed to take it up the steps. So like it just became part of the documentation of this show. And then, Jacob like built this prop, and again, we talked about like the props. This is Doug's work, like the props, or I'm not gonna say the props, the artwork that was in the show also was in the photographs, and it was like the fragment of what we did with it. Like this armadillo, again with the kids, like Ryan wanted to deal with an armadillo, so he ordered one on eBay, and it showed up in a box, during dinner time, and it was just like, and then he made this mold, and to see these two stooges try to like figure out how to open the mold up, it's just these great, this is the armadillo. Eventually, like he's a paper armadillo in the oven. They were trying to figure out how to dry it. This is the concrete armadillo. I mean, just all the kids seeing, and like everyone seeing the different stages of this armadillo. So this kid that I started with, Ethan, my son, like my first son, like who started when he was 3, is now 15. And he just went to homecoming, and it's kind of an interesting documentation to see him, and to see him through all these photographs, and to like have his personality and input. We bought a house. I figured when we were in Italy in the south, where there's like no communication, we would stop at a coffee shop and like, you know, check our email, and someone would be like, hey, are you going to that show in Chelsea tonight? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'll make it tonight. And I realized that like we could be anywhere. Like we made the connections. We could be almost be anywhere, and we could show up, and like I could send my work when I needed to. And so we like, you know, we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 kids. I mean, in New York City, I think our rent was like $2,500 a month. And we decided to buy a house, which the mortgage was like, I think $1,100 or $1,000 a month. And we just decided to like settle down for a little bit, or be in a place that $1,000 a month. You know, we still went to Germany. We locked up our doors, closed our windows. We rented our apartment to some Germans, and we went to Europe, and we didn't think twice. And it was cheap enough where we weren't like, man, it's $2,500 a month we're spending. And it was funny because this was like 10 years. I think we moved around for 10 years, and like here, like we opened up our wedding gifts, some of our wedding gifts, and we're like, who chose this? You know, it's funny how taste changed over 10 years. We ended up selling that house. I fixed this house up. It was built in 1918. I fixed it up. We sold it for some money. First thing, I mean, it was like, for me, it was a giant installation. We sold it. We bought this house. I wanted a different property to kind of deal with. Fixing this house, we probably won't, I know we won't stay. I mean, there's nothing there, but we will sell it, and it's just something like while we're like passing through. But you know, one thing in New York was always space, and it was more important for me to have space to be able to work, and for my kids to have a yard at some point than to just like the hustle of it. So, you know, it's been a place where like I could spread out. I could spread all my materials out. And, you know, every once in a while, like I'll still build stuff out of clay, and I'll still like, you know, kind of put it within my work. But it's like, it's a piece. I don't feel like slaughtering pigs. But in, you know, in the context, it works. I'm almost done with this talk, but there was also some color that for me, you know, has always been an issue. And I go back to that Grunwald piece that I saw, and like whenever I worked with color, one thing was like the color was always distracting. There was always something there that like distracted me. And then the other thing that happened was it's just not very visceral. So I started like painting on top of my photographs, oil painting, and like, you know, all kinds of painting. There was like, I was at USF as a visiting artist, associate professor, and like, you know, at the end I really wanted to stay. The director of the school said, look, we only have 2 positions that open next year. One's art history and one's painting. And he said, I don't see you fitting in either. And I thought, oh yeah, watch me. So I started like, I went home, all I was doing was painting on my photographs. And like I got out all this like language, I was reading books, I started like writing an artist statement, a teaching philosophy, all using like painting terms. You know, it was a great packet. I felt really strong about it. I think they took it as a joke. Whatever. But I was having fun. It was like this moment where like I didn't have to think about what I was making. Having like the lines and like the subject matter already there was fun for me, that, you know, all I had to do was figure out what color I wanted to paint the line, and like how did I want to apply the paint. You know, did I want it to be textural? Did I want it to be visceral? Did I want it to be smooth? Which direction did I want the paint to go? And I just had fun. I showed these to my gallery. I had like 40, 50, 60 of them. I don't know. I showed them to like the commercial galleries. They're like, what am I going to do with this? Like, this is stupid. Or they, you know, like they're like, yeah, I don't understand why you're like painting on top of your photographs. But for me also, like, it was kind of fun to cover them up. You know, there's these moments in my life that like I kind of was angry. And to just kind of cover them up, you know, was liberating. Like, you know, to have this texture was somewhat liberating. You know, I was looking at where to work. When we were buying a house, we were like looking at all these places, and there was like this water mill that like the realtor showed us. He's like, I know you're gonna love it. And I saw this place. It was for sale, it was foreclosed. And I was like, I couldn't talk my wife into it. And, it was a job. But it stuck with me. And again, like I thought at the end, or, like a few months later, I said, I really want to work in there. So the realtor, I asked the realtor if he'd talk to the owner and see if I could work in there. And, rather than sneaking in, that would be the obvious thing. And then it would be like, I guess as an adult, you learn that you don't need to sneak in, you can ask. The guy was like, the owner of this place was like, sure. He took me in for a tour. He said, I don't know if you can see anything that you could do anything with here. And I'm like thinking like, oh my gosh, like every inch of this place I could do something with. He gave me a key and said, just let me know when you come and go. Give me some kind of schedule. And I was like, again, like if you don't ask, if you don't like think of it and like go outside the opportunity, like, it might not happen. And it's just about like kind of asking or thinking about it and coming up with it. So, I started like messing around a little bit again with like digital, which I never did. But the language of digital arts has always kind of, come into the black and white work that I do. And just kind of, I've always been like interested in intuitive decisions to know like when to stop. I mean, it'd be really easy for me to Photoshop my whole body in this, but actually I don't want to fake that. I want to show you the eraser marks. And I always joke because a lot of students they'll go too far. And I believe in intuition. I believe to sit there and to say like, stop. And to rely on that moment, because at that moment I said stop, and like to move on. And I was still kind of like dealing with like these ideas of self-portraits that I have been thinking about in like my traditional work, but like I can't do and I can't figure out. And I'm just kind of like, trying to like, work through these ideas of, what it is to be a self-portrait and to use my kids and my family and my wife like within these body parts that are somewhat, it makes sense to use them in that way. And then like what size to print them at, because this size is very different than doll-like, so to have that kind of that too. As I started this presentation, I said that, things like we've always been kind of fortunate, from scholarships to like just being in a good support system to like, lucking out. Every time we turn, like there's been someone there that's just been like, helpful. And I think any of my friends know that, I shouldn't be mic'd up is one thing, but they also know that like, I hope they would say that I'm a generous person. Like if something floats across my desk, like I want them to have success. Like, Chris Miller and I are both applying to the same job. He got it and I was so happy for him, I don't care. Like it wasn't meant for me. And if there's a show, like if there's a connection, I want to connect people. And last, I think, there's been some success, but these are all the rejections I got the first 2-3 years out of school. I used to carry this thing around. I used to like go through it and figure out what else to apply to. Making the work is the fun part of the job, when the business side is the work part of the job. I made this, and I said if I look up to a lot of people, but last week I said like I'm kind of fascinated by Karl Rove and statistics and the way that he can kind of like figure things out, and I could go into that much farther, but I wanted to be able to look and say like February, what is there? February 1st and see Skowhegan residency, do I want to apply? And I used to like use this thing all the time, and now I don't use it much except for giving it to like my students and like making them use it. But it's a very helpful tool, and I think it's just a simple thing. Rather than going through all those papers all the time, you might as well just like kind of buckle down and like, make it simpler on your life. And I always resisted like having a website But it's part of the business. LinkedIn, Facebook, it's all like part of the Rolodex. It all like feeds in. You know, Google Analytics. Like I like to see like if I see someone in Waynesbury, like Florida, or you know, I know who's looking at it because I can see from the statistics who's looking at it, and I only know one person. But it's pretty interesting. That's the beginning back. So, sorry if that was long. If I can answer any questions. Thank you for sitting in.